Some stories in true crime are so unusual they almost sound like fiction. A woman, poor and black, executed in Georgia's electric chair. The only woman ever to face that fate. Her crime? Killing a man who, by her account, had locked her away, beaten her, and left her desperate for freedom. Yet, for decades, her name was buried under silence. Only many years later did history finally whisper what her trial had ignored. She was right. This is the haunting story of Lena Baker, a tale of survival, injustice, and a justice that came far too late. The year was 1944, and Georgia was still steeped in the shadow of Jim Crow. Life was brutally hard for a poor black woman, and Lena Baker knew hardship all too well. She was a single mother of 3 children, making a living however she could, as a maid, a laundress, taking whatever work would keep food on the table. Then came Ernest Knight, a white gristmill owner twice her age. Officially, she worked for him. Unofficially, whispers spread that Knight had forced her into something darker. Neighbors said he kept her locked away in his gristmill, sometimes for days at a time. Lena herself described it as imprisonment. Her children barely saw her anymore. What little freedom she once had was gone, replaced by fear and chains that were invisible, but no less binding. In small-town Georgia, the word of a black woman carried almost no weight against that of a white man. So no one stepped in to help her. On a March evening in 1944, everything came to a breaking point. Knight had reportedly forced Lena back into the gristmill, but this time she resisted. According to her testimony, Knight came at her with a piece of iron. She feared for her life. In the desperate struggle that followed, she grabbed his gun. And when he kept advancing, she pulled the trigger. Ernest Knight was dead. For Lena, it may have felt like survival at last. But in Jim Crow, Georgia, self-defense for a black woman against a white man was never going to be seen as survival. It would be seen as murder. And so her nightmare deepened. The trial began almost immediately, with shocking speed. Her defense lawyer admitted he had barely prepared. The jury was composed entirely of white men. They deliberated for less than a single day before reaching their verdict: guilty of capital murder. The swiftness of the trial was unusual, but not in Georgia's history of racial justice. What stood out most were the glaring inconsistencies. Witnesses had spoken about Knight's violent reputation. They admitted he was often seen with Lena, sometimes dragging her into his car. But the court dismissed this testimony. The judge and jury ignored her claims of abuse and captivity, treating them as irrelevant. The sentence was death. On August 5, 1945, while the world celebrated the closing days of World War II, Lena Baker was led into Georgia's death chamber. She wore a simple prison dress. No family stood with her, only prison guards, officials, and a minister. She addressed them with words that echoed far beyond those prison walls. "What I done, I did in self-defense, or I would have been killed myself. Where I have sinned, I have already paid. I will meet my God." Moments later, electricity surged through her body. At just 44 years old, Lena Baker became the only woman executed in Georgia's electric chair. But here is where the story deepens into a chilling irony. Lena was executed for killing a man who had imprisoned her. Georgia law at the time recognized self-defense. White defendants had used it successfully in similar cases. Some white women who killed abusive husbands were acquitted altogether. Yet for Lena, a poor black mother, the plea was never truly heard. The irony cuts deeper when we consider Knight's reputation. His own family admitted later that he had a violent streak. Records revealed the state itself knew that his employment of Lena blurred the line between work and coercion. And yet none of that spared her. So why was her trial rushed through in a single day? Why were key witnesses silenced, their testimony brushed aside? Why was death considered the only possible punishment? The answer is as stark as it is tragic. Because Lena Baker was poor, because she was black, and because she was a woman with no one powerful enough to defend her. For 6 decades, Lena Baker's name lived only as a forgotten entry in Georgia's grim history. Then, in 2005, something extraordinary happened. Activists, historians, and surviving family members pushed the state to reopen her case. They argued that Lena had been wrongfully convicted, that her trial was little more than a performance of justice. And at last, the Georgia Board of Pardons and Paroles agreed. 60 years after her execution, they issued Lena Baker a posthumous pardon. They declared she should have been convicted not of murder, but of manslaughter. It was a recognition of the truth she had spoken with her last breath. She had acted in self-defense. It was too late for Lena herself, but for her children, grandchildren, and for history, the pardon meant something profound. It was a crack of light breaking through the darkness of Jim Crow justice. Her story is steeped in painful irony. A woman executed for defending herself in a society that never defended her. A trial that lasted less than a day, while a pardon took 60 years. Yet even in that delay, there is a haunting sense of justice finally being served. Though the electric chair silenced her voice, history has restored her truth. Today, Lena Baker stands not only as a victim of injustice, but as a reminder of how justice can fail and how truth, no matter how delayed, cannot be executed. Because when justice is blinded by race, class, and gender, it ceases to be justice at all. And in Lena Baker's case, the real crime was not her act of self-defense. It was the system that condemned her for surviving. Click the like button, share, and subscribe for more chilling true crime story.